Hello, and welcome to another episode of Upstate Archives. My name is Christina, and each week I sit down with local experts to dig into the Capital Region's deep and wonderful history. This week I am joined by two experts from the New York State Library, and we're going into a little bit of a Christmas episode with the upcoming holiday season. First, I'm joined by Lauren Moore. She is a New York State librarian, and Elizabeth Jacobowski. She is a New York State senior librarian with the Manuscripts and Special Collections Unit. How are you ladies doing today?
I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. All right, we'll just dig right into it. Sure. Today, we are talking about Twas the Night Before Christmas, a iconic poem. Is that what it's considered, or a piece of literature? Like, what exactly can we call Twas the Night Before Christmas?
It's definitely a poem.
A poem?
I would definitely say a poem.
Yeah, of course. I remember reading it growing up when I was a little kid, just like my parents reading it the night before Christmas. So, I mean, before I guess we get into that specifically, tell me a little bit about yourself. So what do you guys do at the New York State Library? What exactly is the New York State Library for people who don't know?
So I'm the state librarian, the one and only. It's the best job in, I would say, the whole state, maybe the whole world. In this role, I get to oversee the entire state library's operations, which include our Division of Library Development. That's a kind of like a mini state education department, but just for libraries, where we administer funding for libraries across the state. We oversee policy. We provide support services for libraries. New York has 762 public libraries, which is more than any other state. It's one of like the neat and great things about this place. I oversee the Talking Book and Braille Library, which is a service that provides accessible reading materials to any New Yorker. So if you have a visual impairment, a physical impairment, or a print disability that might affect your ability to read a print book, you can have access to digital or audio books that are accessible through our service. And then finally, I oversee the state's research library, which is amazing. And this poem is a part of our collection, which is one of the oldest and largest collections in the country.
Oh my gosh.
We were established in 1818. We have 20 million items that document the history of New York, its people, and its policy. So really, really cool stuff happening within our building.
A lot of stuff happening. And how about you?
So I am in the Manuscripts and Special Collections Unit as part of the Research Library at the State Library. And our unit is the unit that oversees basically the most precious historical documents that we have at the State Library. So we'll have manuscript materials going back to Dutch New York. We have the Troy Sentinel, the poem itself that we're talking about today, as Lauren said. We have prints, broadsides, musical scores, any kind of paper document, obviously books as well. And it's an incredible place to work. Every day there's something new. Someone will find something that you've never seen before, or you uncover something in your, while you're assisting a patron. It's just an incredible place to work. I can't think of any place better.
Wow, that's really awesome. I mean, just to be surrounded by so much knowledge and history every day, just so cool. So we'll jump right into it. I mean, Twas the Night Before Christmas, as I said, pretty iconic for children everywhere. Had you guys, before, working at the library, I mean, I'm assuming you guys also knew about this poem. Did you guys grow up with this poem as well?
I definitely did. We sang a version of it in choir.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. But definitely had read it. How about you, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember reading it when I was a kid. I had like the cheesiest version with some cartoon mice in it. It wasn't even like the beautiful iconic mice. It was just some mice, but loved that book. And then even with my children, it's something that I read with them as well. One of the most special things in my personal collection is a version of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas that my grandfather read and recorded for my children before he died. So like we still have like a version of him reading it, which is so like really special. But
that's so special.
Every time I think about this poem, I think about like all the traditions that grew out of it, and also this personal connection.
Absolutely. I mean, with it just in our personal history here, can you tell me a little bit about how it came into history in general? Like, when was it created? Just give us a little bit of an introduction into this.
Sure. So an account of a visit from St. Nicholas was first published in the Troy Sentinel in 1823, December 23rd, 1823. It was published anonymously. The poem opens, there's a paragraph or so before the poem that basically says, "We know not to whom we owe, the creation of this poem, but it's incredible and we want to share it with you," basically. Then, it depends on, there's a bit of controversy about how it maybe got there. But the most widely accepted story is that a friend of Clement Clarke Moore had brought it to the Troy Sentinel, and they published it because they saw how charming of a poem it was. But that's how it got out into the world. Yeah.
Gotcha. And what's this controversy? Like, what are the other sides to this?
So Clement Clarke Moore is the most widely accepted author of the poem. He, again, wasn't credited at first. It was an anonymous submission. But then so that was in 1823. And then in 1837, a friend of his put out an anthology of poems and credited the poem to Moore. But Moore still hadn't said anything. And then in 1844, Moore published a collection of poems called Poems. And he included Visit from St. Nicholas in that collection, which is his moment of publicly, staking his claim to it. And it was accepted for a very long time that he was the author of the poem. In fact, his obituary mentions the poem twice. Really? And included an entire reprinting of it after the obituary.
Oh, wow.
That's how connected to this poem he was. But then, about the year 2000, an author named, I think it was Donald Foster, he was contacted by the descendants of Henry Livingston Jr., who was an American Revolutionary War veteran. He was a farmer, a surveyor, I believe. He also wrote poems, painted, had a lot of fun with his kids. His descendants have, amongst themselves for years, said that their father, or Henry, was the one who had written this poem. And like I said, in the year 2000 or so, one of them had reached out to Foster and asked him to look into it because he's a linguist. So he studies how language works. And he did a comparison using his expertise, and according to him and his findings, he says that Livingston is the more likely author. But then, of course, there's the backlash. There's other scholars. There are always other scholars, and there are always other opinions. And so they pushed back against it. Basically, what it comes down to is there is no handwritten manuscript from either gentleman with a date that's associated with it. So at this point, it's sort of, it's kind of up to you. Now, personally, if I'm allowed to interject my personal opinion, I believe it is Clement Clarke Moore. It's like that debate about who wrote Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I just upset a lot of research.
Is that a controversial thing?
My bad take. No, but I don't, again, my personal opinion, just to separate this from anything, my personal opinion is that Moore was a man who studied theology. His father had been a bishop. I don't see why he would lie. Not that I'm accusing the children of Livingston and their descendants of lying. I think maybe there was a similarity, a similar poem, a similar sentiment, something they remembered as children. And then it just kind of snowballed out from there.
And Livingston and Clements were friends, right? They were family friends. They were
all kind of connected. Okay. New York was a small town back then.
Yeah.
And I mean the state of New York. They were all sort of interconnected. All these families sort of, went in similar circles.
Right. I just love the idea of someone or a family for 200 years carrying this beef with them, this gripe, and we must prove it. And that finally, they take their shot in 2000, and it just makes the story even more interesting now.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. How do you deal with that sort of controversy, uncertainty exactly at the New York State Library.
I mean, it's one of the benefits of primary source documents, which is why we keep these things and make them available to people so that, we don't have to be the people interpreting history. People don't have to take anyone, our word for it or any scholar's word for it. They can look directly at these sources and begin to make their own conclusions and piece their own histories together. And we see that every day. So many fascinating research projects are coming out of our collections. People traveling from all over to come and look deeply at some of our primary sources and make discoveries that no one had made before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. And you had said before that they published the poem, even though it was anonymous, because they just found it really charming. What was the other reception that it got? Like, how did the public in general view the poem when it first came out?
They loved it.
Yeah,
they loved it. It ran anonymously in that newspaper, and then it just sort of spread like wildfire. People couldn't get enough of it. It really is charming. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've all read it. We've all enjoyed it. It's lasted this long. There's a reason. And yeah, it was like a viral hit.
Last year, the New York Times claimed that it was kind of like a misleading article, but it said that they had an important role in this and that they were one of the first people to publish this poem. But I think the first publication in the New York Times was like 20 years after the Troy Sensible publication. So, and again, that's easy to show where we have that primary source document from 1823 that shows like, hey, this is where this poem first appeared.
No, absolutely. I think it's so cool that something that we all grew up with. I mean, not only just here in the capital region, but just like throughout the country, maybe throughout the world, is just centered. It's from here in Troy, New York. I had literally no idea until just a few weeks ago when I was starting to research this. So cool.
Yeah. And Elizabeth and I were chatting about this yesterday, and she made this really beautiful point about the fact like this is a very much a Hudson Valley kind of story. So like the poem itself, it's not an accident that it came out of this region. So I'll let you take it from here, but I love this aspect.
Sure. So basically, after the American Revolution, New Yorkers sort of settled down and looked with kindness and interest back on their Dutch roots. So there was sort of like this resurgence of Dutch history. Mm-hmm. Not that I think it had gone anywhere, quite frankly. But the Dutch had ties to Sinterklaas, Santa Claus, which is Saint Nick, but in Dutch. And so there were different callbacks. So there was a gentleman named John Pintard who named Saint Nicholas as the sort of like patron saint of the New York Historical Society in 1804, which was, again, callback to this Sinterklaas tie-in. Mm-hmm. Then Washington Irving, the gentleman who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
He wrote a parody history called The History of New York, written by Dietrich Knickerbocker. And in that, he includes a Santa Claus figure, a St. Nicholas figure, who smokes a pipe, who puts his finger aside his nose with a wink, who has a sled or a sleigh driven by a horse, and who delivers gifts to children. And there's may or may not be a chimney component to that as well. So now we've got more Dutch history building. And then there's, Clement Clark Moore and his poem, and we get more Santa lore coming out of that. It just sort of like this snowballs impact on lore. It starts with these earlier roots and then continues, and everybody sort of builds on it, leading up to Thomas Nast, who was a Bavarian immigrant who came to America, and he started drawing for Harper's Weekly. And he drew Santa in 1863 at the height of the Civil War. And he continues the description given in A Night Before Christmas, a jolly old fellow. He gives him that long Dutch pipe. He also uses Santa as sort of a propaganda figure for the war to bolster the Union. And then, of course, there's the famous Yes, Virginia, There Is a Santa Claus editorial that comes out in the late 1800s, which may or may not be Dutch. The gentleman's name was Frederick Church, but he was from Rochester, New York. Wow. So shout out Western New York. So yeah, New York is sort of kind of central to Santa history in America. I love that.
Wow, that's really awesome. So, like, it's safe to say then that this poem was one of the reasons why we have the Santa Claus that we know today and the way that we perceive Santa Claus.
Yeah, a lot of the descriptions of Santa from this poem are really like the first time that Santa was described that way, and they're parts of that iconic Santa that we think of today.
That's so cool, just knowing. Oh my gosh, I'm like, that's so cool. All right, well, this will bring us, I think, to our first break. And when we come back, we'll take a little bit of a deeper look into the work and then talk about just how it made its way to the New York State Library. We'll be back. Hi, welcome back to this episode of Upstate Archives. Today I am joined by Lauren Moore and Elizabeth Jacobowski from the New York State Library. We've been talking about Twas the Night Before Christmas, an iconic poem that apparently came from Troy that brought us what we know as Santa Claus, which I just think is so cool. So I think a good topic to go into now is just taking a bit of a deeper look into the work. I have some photos here of the poem itself. Can you tell us, how exactly does the poem compare to the versions that we see today?
Believe it or not, it's almost completely intact.
Really?
The most major change are the name of two of the reindeer. Wow. So at the very end of his roll call, Santa in the poem, the original poem, says Dunder and Bliksem, which is Dutch for thunder and lightning.
Oh.
And then in later iterations, including Moore's own that he published in 1844, he changes the names to Donder and Blitzen, which is closer to the German versions of thunder and lightning. And then, of course, Donder eventually becomes Donner. So we get Donner and Blitzen.
Wow.
That's the biggest change. The only other change that I could find was the end of the original poem. Santa says, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." And, of course, in America, we're more likely to say Merry Christmas.
Oh.
So that changed at some point in its history, and now that's usually what people print.
And the other thing is that we all know it as Twas the Night Before Christmas, which is the first line, but it was published with a different title.
Yeah, can you remind me one more time? I know you said at the beginning. What was the first title?
An Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas.
Okay, it's a little bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, I get why it's changed.
So, tell me a little bit, how did it get to the New York State Library specifically? Like, how did it come from the Troy Sentinel? Where did it travel to after that?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest mystery of this all right now. The New York State Library, as I said, was established in 1818. But there was a fire in 1911 that destroyed nearly everything in the library's collection at that point. Wow. And the things that did survive, which were, the librarians at the time saved what was considered most precious, those items are badly burned. So we have actually really fascinating documents from the earliest Dutch history of Albany. And they were saved, but they are crumpled around the edges and burned. Wow. We have card catalogs from that area that are or from that time period that are singed. It's really fascinating to see that, the evidence of that historic fire. But we understand that if there were newspapers in the collection, they would have been destroyed. So the version that we have is actually in perfect condition. It's a bound edition with about a decade of Troy Sentinels bound together. We can't tell quite when it was bound, and we can't tell when it came back to our collection. Huh. So there is a good chance that in 1823 we may have been collecting the Troy Sentinel. But by the time of the fire, the Troy Sentinel was no longer being published. So the question is whether that was part of the library's deliberate efforts to acquire things that had been lost. They repurchased many newspapers. Also, libraries from around the country and world, in fact, donated materials to help replace the library's collection. Could have come in at that time. It also could have been something that was donated later to help fill a gap in our collections or something like that. It's just interesting. So many things are so well documented within the library's collections, but in early libraries, newspapers just were not part of that catalog record very often, which is why that early documentation doesn't exist for this item.
That's really interesting. And what do we know exactly about the Troy Sentinel specifically? Like, how long was it in print for? When did it? I mean, is it still around?
No, so it was a semi-weekly newspaper that was published between 1823 and 1832. So it didn't really have a long run. And obviously it hit its high point early. But that's about it. I think our bound version has most, if not all, of the issues.
Wow. Okay.
We have the digitized copy available for anyone to look at, so you can actually see all of the pages of this one issue that has the poem in it. And it's so neat to see, like, this. Just the poem is so insignificant within the context of the larger paper. It's a tiny sliver, I think, on the front page at least. But
page 3.
Page 3. Wow.
Just a tiny sliver on page 3 with a bunch of other ads for merino wool. Elizabeth noticed, and all kinds of like funny things that are charming to look at as well. But it was, there's no illustration, there's nothing to call out. Hey, look at this poem that's about to change the way that our, much of our culture celebrates this holiday, which is just a really neat thing to take a look at. So I encourage everyone to visit our website and look at the digitized copy.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really just like a hidden treasure. Like, you could miss it. You could easily miss it just going through that. Wow, that's so cool. And how many other copies in the world are there? Do we know of?
Well, the Troy Public Library has a copy.
Oh, okay.
And that's it in terms of local copies that I could find. I think the New York Historical their library has a copy, but it's a handful at most.
Yeah, wow.
It was just a small paper from upstate New York. It didn't have the reach of some larger papers. So we're just excited for what was able to be kept. Like Lauren said, these original sources are so important, and they give context to what was going on in the world at the time the poem came out. And we're just really excited to have such a wonderful copy in our collections.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what is, I guess, sort of to bring it back to the New York State Library today, are you guys doing anything with the poem for the holiday season? Is there, can people come in and see other like holiday sort of artifacts?
Well, we started a tradition of putting this paper on display each year around, before Christmas, and people really are excited to come and see it. And they're always surprised by, to see the larger paper. Yeah. So we put it'll be on display from December, I believe, 20th through the 26th at some point, either in the museum or in the state library. We're doing a reading of it on Sunday, which will be quite fun. And then some other like holiday Santa letter writing, those kinds of things that help families have a nice fun thing to do, and centered around this cool artifact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. It was like really just amazing to see how much this tiny little paper that came from Troy that I've never even heard of until now, and this like poem that I grew up reading, it all came from here. That's so cool. Is there anything else you guys would like to share about the New York State Library? Any like events coming up that you'd like to talk about? Any things that people should know if they want to take a visit?
Just encourage all researchers out there, and I'm sure you have lots that listen to this podcast, given the nature of it. Come on in, meet with our librarians. We love to provide our expert assistance. There's nothing that brings us greater joy than finding time to meet with a researcher and helping to connect them with their resources. There are so many treasures in our collection, and we're happy to help provide access to them. And if you're not in the Albany area or can't make the trip, our digital collections are a really wonderful place to explore truly amazing items in our collection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much again. This was so amazing. Hopefully, I'll be able to bring you guys in another time to talk about the artifacts from the library. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining me on another episode of Upstate Archives. I hope to see you guys next week. Thank you.